And a bit of a surprising move, Calvin Ridley to the Tennessee Titans, 4 years, $92 million, $50 million guaranteed, according to reports. And a little bit confusing to me. See, Rob, I'll be honest. Like, look, I always love great players coming in, but like at some point, who are the Titans? What are they trying to do? Why Calvin Ridley right now for this team in this moment?
They need a vertical threat. I mean, they really do. They need someone with separation. And I mean, that's the best part of Ridley's game. I think you could argue is downfield speed. I think Ridley's performance in Jacksonville, I think it could have been better. I think it was hurt by the fact that Lawrence was not healthy. It was interesting when I was at the combine, I had somebody tell me that Lawrence wasn't healthy for a lot of last season, not just after the ankle injury. So that there were some other nagging things that he was dealing with. And so, you could argue that even though he had an okay season last year, it might have been a little bit depressed by what was going on at the quarterback spot. But look, Will Levis has got a big arm. He's all about throwing vertical throws, and you need a wideout who can fly. Calvin Ridley can absolutely do that. What's curious to me about this, it's not curious because it's different management now, but I remember being at the owners' meetings at the Breakers Hotel, standing behind John Robinson, then GM of the Tennessee Titans. And Tyreek Hill had done he had been traded and he had done his deal with the Miami Dolphins. Devontae Adams he was with the Raiders and he had done his deal with the Raiders. And I remember there was another GM that did the flyby on John and said, something along the lines of wide receiver money it's really big. And he knew that obviously AJ Brown was sitting there going, I want a contract extension here. And John made a remark, something along the lines of, yeah, we're not doing that kind of money at receiver. And I'm like, well, you just won't be around. Maybe the 25 million versus, what is it? 3 years or 4 years and 92. You guys can do the math on that. I'm not a math whiz. Obviously, it's, 23 million. 23 million versus 25 million APY guarantees that are not all that dissimilar, and a younger player who's already in your system. Maybe if AJ Brown, that deal gets done, John Robinson might still be there. Mike Vrabel might still be there. Like maybe we're looking at a different situation. Instead, neither is there, and Calvin Ridley is getting money that AJ Brown AJ Brown, honestly, AJ Brown might have done this deal with the Titans, a couple of years ago. He might have said, yeah, okay, close enough. 23, gets me there, and I stay in house, and I'm happy with the development of the offense, and and then we'll do another deal after that, and I'll try to end my career here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because also we saw that not only did John Robinson make that trade or allow the trade of AJ Brown to the Eagles on his watch, but Amy Adams seemed to feel pretty strongly about that in terms of how long he kept his job after, and they did not like seeing what AJ Brown was able to do with the Philadelphia Eagles. So they definitely, I feel like since that point, have felt like they needed to go get a guy, and I like it. I mean, I feel like personally, you got to be excited for a guy like Calvin. Of like, look, he definitely made a mistake. He should not have gambled, et cetera, et cetera. But to have the mental health challenges he had and the gambling challenges he had and now be able to make generational money, it's like kind of a good feel-good story of like guys can get back.
And Ridley, too, remember, he did that piece for the Players Tribune, which you could argue who wrote it. Did he really write it? Whatever. But that was impressive to me. Like that was something where I remember when he went out, don't you remember? There were opinions. Some people were like, oh, he's done. Like because we weren't yet familiar with players gambling on football, let alone on their own teams. And we were like, oh my God, it's the uncrossable line. Now we're like, well, yeah, you can cross a lot. Maybe it's not as bad as we once thought. But the fact that he hit it head on was like, fine, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to step out. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. I'm going to tell you what my mindset was. At that point, when I read through that, I was like, all right, you know what? Mistakes happen. I feel like this is adequately explained. He deserves an opportunity to go out there and get himself back on track. And as Jori said, I mean, it is kind of a feel good situation that somebody can make a mistake. It was a sizable mistake, and actually survive it.
And as much as I'm curious where the Titans are headed, because I don't think the roster is particularly good right now, I do need to at least acquiesce the fact that Will Levis was the second-round draft pick. So that means you get 4 years, not 5 on him. They've given him some reps, but you've got to give him weapons to figure out if he's the guy. And that's going to accelerate a little bit because at some point you don't have as much time. I know franchise tag, all these things, but I'll never fault a team that has a quarterback they may believe in for going out and getting weapons for him. I just am not sure if we're doing the old wins above replacement. I don't know if Calvin Ridley's going to a team where it's going to make them staggeringly better, but it will give them better view of who Will Levis is, which becomes one of the most important things that they can do this year with Brian Callahan as their head coach.
In Fitz, it gives them flexibility at their draft pick, right? I mean, you got what's their pick, number 7, right? 7th overall pick. And so you're sitting there and you're going, well, now the tackle should absolutely be in play for us. Like, we could take the best left tackle off the board. We have Peter Skoronski. We just signed Cushenberry. Okay, we got some assets on the offensive line all of a sudden. Like, that's a great thing for us. We've got a backfield with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears that's different in terms of the style that we used to run. We're not just going to beat you to death. We're going to instead, we're going to have a lot of versatility with these two backs. And now it gives you 3 wideouts where Treylon Burks, who's clearly not gotten himself on track. Well, know what? Now you're the third option, man. Like, you should have an opportunity
next to Hopkins
here.
And Ridley, that's pretty good.
Yeah, next to Hopkins and Ridley, you're probably not going to have the number 1 or number 2 DB rolling to you. You know, obviously it's going to depend where you line up on the field, but I think it even takes a little bit of pressure off of him to have to immediately produce, gives him an opportunity to click himself into place. You know, and maybe if that happens when Hopkins ages out or contracts out, however you want to look at, you know, what his future could be, maybe you turn Burks into a viable number 2, which I think really was the hope last year. And obviously that got derailed.
Right. And I think I go back to something Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network's draft expert, said leading into the combine, which is when he was talking about Bryce Young, and he said, I always asked, does a young quarterback have the 3 Ps? Pass catchers, play callers, and protection. He felt like Bryce Young had none of the 3. I would argue that Will Levis in Tennessee now has improved all 3 of those. He's got Calvin in addition to Hopkins and Treylon Burks. They got Lloyd Cushenberry. They've upgraded their offensive line. And Brian Callahan should be an excellent play caller. He comes from a good track record. Oh, by the way, he brought his dad Bill with them. So it's not only an improvement in offensive line players, but also an improvement in the offensive line coaching, because you now have arguably top 5 offensive line coach, if not top 2. I feel like after Stoutland and Philly, I don't know that there's anyone else who's like really, really contending for that title. And so I feel like kind of what we're saying is you can see very early into Will Levis's contract, especially because you're not going to have the 5th-year option on him based on when you drafted him, what he's able to do, what he's not able to do, and how you want to build your franchise accordingly.
Next to Stoutland, I would argue that Callahan is one of the most valuable assistant coaches in the entire NFL, right? So you potentially have offensively, you've potentially upgraded at head coach just because you're pairing an offensive guy with the quarterback that you're grooming. Again, being able to add Callahan into that mix and what he can do with that offensive line I think is immense given his track record. You've added between last year's draft, this year's draft, and then free agency, you've added a center, a guard who should be pretty damn good if he plays in that position, a tackle who, if you take the first tackle off the board and say it's Joe Alt, is supposed to be a hell of a tackle, right? Okay, so all that's been upgraded. Yeah, you've upgraded skill position pieces. Ran Carthen, okay, like I said on Tennessee radio today, I was, the whole let so-and-so cook, let Ran run, right? Like that's the phrase I'm coining as GM, let Ran run. He's added Cheeto, right? Awuzie. He added Nick Folk. It's a pretty big deal. Like, God, thank God. Like, let's resolve a kicker. Added Mason Rudolph at backup quarterback, who's got experience, I think, down the stretch showed. I would say he's a quality backup quarterback in the NFL at the very least. To me, they've added some pretty solid pieces in free agency, and I don't know if it'll work. Maybe it won't. But I think you are doing the one thing coming out of last season that you had to do, which is to go, we got to give Will Levis the best shot we can. Like, we got to find out if this guy can get this done, and why not give him as much as we can going into, the passing, program in this offseason. So,
and it feels to that end too, C-Rob, like this is just an era of change for the Titans. No Derrick Henry, no Ryan Tannehill. Like, this is just an era of change. So fans are going to have to get used to change. And the quicker that Brian Callahan, sorry, Freudian slip, the quicker that Brian can sort of come in and identify exactly what his style is going to be, I think the better everybody will understand it.